My name is Natalie Yoder. I'm one of the conference organizers. I mostly do website technical stuff, which is really funny because I'm not a techie, so I'm not exactly sure how I got in that role. So that's why I've been trying to yell at people and get everyone in here on time. I'm also with the Specialty Crops Program. So Marky Chansky is on your calendars or your agendas for today. Marky Chansky and I run the Specialty Crops Program together. He's a full-time faculty member at CSU, tenured faculty member, and I'm a research associate. So I do a lot of the grunt work. We have some brainy days together, but most of the time I'm doing a lot of the grunt work. Luckily, most of the slides that Mark had prepared were slides that his graduate students had prepared for him or that I had prepared for him. So I'm going to give you a taste of a little bit of what we're doing in our program, but really centered on inputs in organic. And so this is just a sample of research that we're doing that's related to inputs in organic. Okay, so before I go into that, a little bit more about the Specialty Crops Program. So as probably everyone in this room knows, specialty crops was a term that came around as kind of the opposite of commodity crops. So a lot of things fall into the world of specialty crops. We have a federal grant program that's for specialty crops, and this covers tree fruit, it covers small fruits, it covers nursery plants, it covers greenhouse trees, it covers a lot of things besides just vegetables. But what we do is I think the really fun part, which is vegetables. So most of our research is in the world of vegetables. Is that right? Do we do anything besides vegetables? Small fruit? Aronia. Oh, we have one small fruit product. I'm not going to talk about it today because it sucks. Anyway, I also don't have a clicker, so that's going to throw me off a little bit because I'm a big clicker user.
Brian didn't have.
Huh?
Brian didn't have.
It's
excluded from specialty crops.
Excluded, yeah. So we're gonna. So Brian's gonna talk about hemp afterwards, even though we're a specialty crop session. So that's a little confusing. I'm also gonna close this door because close the door. Okay. Close the door. All right. Okay, yeah, so that's an overview, right? We do everything vegetable. So part of our world is research and part of our world is outreach. We're only about 10% outreach, and that's mostly just trying to get our research that we're doing to be based on farmer interest and then to go back to the farmers and be useful for them. So we're gonna talk a little bit about those projects today. Okay, it's not moving. Hold on, click. I think I'm going to click that every time, huh? Okay, so what to do is the specialty crop program. I've covered that a little bit. And then the input research we're going to talk to you about today is water as a critical input in this region, organic weed control as a critical input. We're going to talk about a product called Azomite that we have a little study funded by Azomite to fully disclose that. And we're going to talk a little bit about cultivar selection as well as an important input in organic systems. Then we'll have some question and discussion time. I think I have about 20 slides, and I tend to talk really fast, so tell me to slow down if you need me to slow down, and if we get through it, we'll have plenty of time for some chatting. And before we move, I need to remember, we have an hour, so we're good. Okay, so this is we have a nice little flyer. This is the blurb about it, that the Specialty Crop Program at CSU empowers growers and producers through Colorado by supplying them with science-based information to inspire innovation, competitiveness, and success. We collaborate with researchers, but we also collaborate with farmers. So if you're ever interested in doing research, we have a lot of on-farm research going on that we're starting this year. So let me know. We're doing mostly cultivar trials on farm. And there's something else I wanted to tell you about this. We are funded. Well, let me see if this is on the next slide. We are funded by the Colorado Department of Ag. So Colorado Department of Ag, through the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program, funds a huge portion of our program. So CSU is half of it, and they're the other half of it. So we couldn't do what we're doing without CDA. So I really want to give them credit where credit is due. Marky Chansky, who had a baby, his wife had a baby last week, and he is taking care of 4 little boys, all under the age of 5 right now. Could not be here today. So I'm giving the talk and move him, but the 2 of us run the program, and we, at our peak, had 7 graduate students this last summer, which was insane. I think we have 5 or 4 right now, 2 of which are in this room, and another one is off getting oil for his car, but I'll present some of the research for you. Okay, so we're gonna start with Deb. Deb's sitting on the front right here. Deb's looking at water stress or water in particular cultivars and squash and watermelon. So we're looking for plants that can deal with low water inputs, right? There's a couple pictures here. A picture of, she's doing a root analysis and a dry down study in a greenhouse. So that's some funny growing medium and some plants that are struggling and dying, so we can see how fast they die, which ones can deal with the least amount of water. This is actually a Cravo, or retractable roof greenhouse, with a summer squash study in it. Some pictures of her watermelon, and these are these watermark sensors we're still on the fence about, so we won't give you conclusions as to if you should put them on your farm yet. But we've been using watermark sensors in order to help us give some scientific numbers to the amount of moisture that's in the soil. And that's a picture of Deb, who's sitting in the front here. And if you ask questions later on, I'll make her answer them. Also, she has a poster with even better pictures. So if you want to know like what all her watermelons look like, you better go over there and check it out. There are two species that she's doing, squash and watermelon, summer squash, and lots of fun different types of watermelon. And she's chosen this due to the popularity in the US, their predominance in the southern United States, their predominance in these dryland climates. And her hypothesis is that existing cultivars of summer squash and watermelon have uncharacterized drought responses, variable degrees of success under drought based on the physiological and morphological characteristics. I'm gonna pull up all of this real quick. So she's got cultivars that she did in the greenhouse. We saw that first picture. And then she did these field trials. Her squash field trials, we actually were able to exclude water from by putting them in a retractable roof greenhouse that we just left the roof closed during all rain events. And then her watermelon were out in the field. She did a control, which was watered 1 time per week. She did a drought, and she did a deficit. And it's a little confusing between the drought and the deficit, but essentially the drought and deficit got the same amount of water, but one of them got it broken up once a week, and one of them only got it every 2 weeks. So maybe imitating more about what kind of moisture you would get, right? Like you're not gonna get rain in a dry climate every week, you're gonna get it more spread out. So looking at the differences between getting a little bit of water every week or even littler every other week. So that's what we're looking at here. Here's some results from her greenhouse. And I just wanna note really cool pictures of root scans on the right here. But the most important part of this is that after all of this hard work that she's done in the greenhouse, which this is, by the way, a very standard way to assess agronomic crops for their ability to tolerate low water, it turns out that I think Doug's decided that this is not the right way to do this for squash, right? So she's trying to test something that is known for agronomic crops into the vegetable world and translate that. And we don't have a system currently, a set protocol for how to test these in the greenhouse. And we're starting to see that maybe this is not the best way, that you can't compare corn and squash to each other and analyze it the same way. So far, statistically speaking, no relationship between cultivars and the roots and their ability. So again, she planted these little tiny plants in this funny growing medium, and then she didn't water them and waited to see how long that they would die and how many roots they would grow during that time. And then she took the roots and scanned them. And so you would think that if a plant in this situation where it's not getting water can really grow roots, it would be able to be more drought tolerant, right? And so that was what we were looking for. Can we see that certain cultivars can grow way more roots in this situation, really go searching for that water in a situation where they're not getting water? And we did not see that in the greenhouse study. Okay, so here's some results from her field study. There's a picture again of the squash inside the Cravo, and here's what we did in the field. We separated the treatments 10 feet apart from each other, 6 to 10 feet apart from each other in rows so that they weren't getting each other's water. So in the Cravos, we watered between July 5th and September 7th. Gotta keep my dates, my month numbers right. And cultivar yields outweighed all treatment differences. So the yield differences between cultivars really kind of keyed in on the fact that maybe cultivar selection is more important than the amount of water that is going on. And then I have a graph here. So here's her yield. So you can see here, desert F1 is an F1, so it's a hybrid green summer squash. looks like it has the highest yield, but we're not seeing much statistical difference between the top 3 performers here, and Crookneck being the only one that's statistically a worse yield than the rest of them. And this is divided up by cultivar because we weren't seeing that treatment significant difference. One thing I do want to note, and I think that Deb found and was really amazed by, was that starting at fruit production, there was no yield difference within the same cultivar. There was no yield difference between the fully watered plants and those that you could cut water in half. So there was a difference in growth before fruit production, but after fruit production, you could cut that water back a lot and still be getting the exact same amount of marketable yield off the plant, which is pretty interesting. Yeah.
Did you taste test them?
Did you taste them?
Oftentimes those squashes will taste god awful from one place and really good from another. So was there any?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah, we wanted to do kind of formal taste testing, but we didn't get that far. We all, tried all of them, and we never came up with a squash that was really bitter or different from the others. So yeah, they held up pretty well. And
size-wise, we're talking about the same size fruit. So I think if you start getting those little stunted little guys, those tend to be really bitter, but same size fruit. It could be that we need to lower that threshold of water, or maybe the control needs to go even lower. So some lessons for next time. So for watermelon, kind of the interesting facts we have for you here is the bricks, so telling you some sort of measure of sweetness of the watermelon. So the treatment interval was similar. We started a little later out in the field, took us a little longer to prep that field and get it planted, and went a little longer in the field. A lot of what determined that we stopped this squash is that the squash plants kind of crapped out at some point, right? Like they started just looking terrible, we had tons of data, time to stop that project. Whereas with watermelon, right, we're taking it until we get as many mature watermelon fruit as we can on the plant. We had horrible hail this year, as anyone in Colorado knows, so that is probably a big reason why we're not seeing a lot of interesting things coming out of our watermelon data. A lot of actual hail damage on the fruit itself, so marketable wise. But we did get some really interesting information about cultivars. And the one I would like to point out that I think Deb is now a huge fan of is called T.O. Yellow. Lots of pictures of it on her poster. So go check it out. Tahada Onaham. Okay. So she really did search far and wide to find cultivars that were historically used in dry regions that maybe aren't the common commercial cultivars, but that maybe if you had a dry situation in your field, this would be a cultivar that you could turn to. So that's kind of the outstander in that. Yep, similar yields in all irrigation treatments. So here's a list of the cultivars for this field trial. As background work, I don't know how many cultivars it was, but it was an absurd amount that she trialed first in the greenhouse to see which ones could handle, like in #1 size pots, which ones could handle low water in the greenhouse. And then a selection of those were taken into the field.
I even got a few zucchini off of those 1 gallon pots.
Yeah, well, 1 gallon pots, you got a few zucchini off of that. But it was, I don't know how many, do you remember how many cultivars at the top of your hand?
20, 30.
Yeah, 20 or 30 cultivars that were trialed ahead of time. So go to our poster, find out more about it. Okay, switching gears a little bit, you heard our other graduate student, Tyler, give a 1-minute lightning talk about Cypress. And this is something we're really excited about. Mark and I found Cypress by some fluke of someone advertising it, I think at a trade show. And we got a little bit of it to trial. And we were extremely impressed, and we thought, heck, this must be a fluke. Like, there's no organic herbicide that works this well. So I did a preliminary year where we were just using it for fun. We did a couple plots where we were testing out different concentrations of it. And then we brought on Tyler as a graduate student, and he's just taken this thing and turned it into a really interesting study. So I'll give you a little bit of information on it. It is omri. It is caprylic and capric acid. This exists, both of these exist in goat's milk. It's what makes goat's milk goaty. They actually also exist in beer. I'm a really big beer nerd. If you've ever had like one of those funky Brett beers, it has caprylic acid in it, and that's why they call it barnyard or goaty or horse blankety. It's because of that caprylic acid. I tell myself this while I'm spraying it, because otherwise I want to get the heck out of the field because it smells like a goat out there. Like it's really potent. So he did a side-by-side study where he looked, he was growing sweet corn, and he didn't weed one plot. He sprayed essentially horticulture vinegar in another plot. Then he sprayed suppress in another plot. And then he did variations of hand weeding. So he wanted to compare all this to each other and then try to bring economics into this a little bit. How much does suppress cost compared to vinegar if you're going to try to get the same amount of effectiveness? So we can see here, obviously, that not weeding is the cheapest. We do actually have, obviously here, and with the case of in sweet corn, we don't really hurt the yield too much by having a weedy field. The damage comes the next year when you try to grow beans in that same field that you didn't weed all year, right? And the weeds are worse. But I do want to compare the vinegar solution to suppress because I think that's the biggest price comparison there. So looking at the cost of materials for 1,000 square feet for the season, he was looking at $109 versus $34. But then if we look over at the effectiveness, percent control, look at that jump in percent control in his chart. So 27% control versus 68% control of weeds. The one thing we found is that suppress knocks weeds down when they're much larger than what vinegar can do. Like vinegar, I mean, it's potent smelling, but it's the damage of burning your nostrils is not the same as vinegar, so there's a little less scariness associated with that. But do you have a question, Brenda?
Yeah, I was just wondering what kinds of weeds were in this field.
Wow, you've got lots of weeds. Yeah.
Whether you have a sense for effectiveness against like some of those.
Sure,
really
sure.
old, like,
So we have Canada thistle, pretty bad. We have pigweed and we have bindweed. Those are our primary guys. Canada thistle, it's all that size, so the height of that puppy is really important. And if you had a bad Canada thistle patch, I would probably up the concentration, go up to 12% concentration with it. This is at a 9% concentration that we're reporting here. And you can go down to like 4% and still get really good effectiveness. Of course, you're not killing off the root. So with bindweed, you're just taking the top off these plants, just like you would be with vinegar. Nothing that we have is systemic. However, in theory, if you take the top off the plant enough, and 2 to 3 weeks is the interval that you need to hit with taking those tops off the plant, you're going to deplete the starch nutrient stock in those roots and eventually, hopefully, get on top of your bindweed problem in that situation. So that was our situation. Those are the 3 main things that we have to deal with. I sprayed for fun. I sprayed Canada thistle that was about this tall. And it died down, but not so much that it couldn't put out a few new leaves, the next week. So you really do need to catch those guys when they're less than a foot tall. I think 9 inches is what Tyler says is his optimum for that. Okay, going to talk a little bit Azomite. Azomite is a micronized mineral product added to the soil. They have lots of claims on their packages. And we became interested in it when there was a conversation going on between Mark and Tyler and Azomite. And they have paid us to do a little study on Azomite. It's still, I think the second year's data has still yet to be compiled in, so this should be just the first year's data in here. It's really hard when you're dealing with these micronutrient trace minerals because the amount you need to put down to equate to 100 pounds per acre or 200 pounds per acre when you're doing a small trial is very small. So he's got a picture here, and you can't really see it, but there's like a few little granules in there of Azomite. We planted it in a row and then put our plastic over that row and had flags everywhere, and we're able to plant on top of the areas that we call the 100 or 200 pounds per acre of Azomite. Here's some research right now. This results right now. Super interesting to look at, but full disclaimer, there is no significance in this, statistically speaking. So maybe with the power of multiple years, we'll start being able to tease out any differences, but visually, it does look like maybe 100 pounds per acre of Azomite is doing something to that crop. Oh, I will also note that based on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our cultivar studies, based on the best performance of our cultivar studies, Tyler chose to use Early Perfect Italian and Stocky Red Roaster as 2, they're called Corno di Toro or roasting type peppers. And so we have a few pictures of those, and those have been our best performers in general as peppers. And so we teased those out and decided to add those into our fertilizer study. So, and you're also seeing some differences in yield between those 2 cultivars. Oh, okay, so we do have 2 years. We have 2017 and we have 2018. So it looks like 2018 pretty much ruined any trends that we were seeing in 2017. I'm pretty sure Marty is really happy about that. The biggest difference was the difference between cultivars, because we are seeing a significant yield difference between the two. We saw some of this in the field, but because he grew so much of these two cultivars, we were really able to tease out which one was a better performer for our region. Okay, and then this is Azomite, and he did a study where he was doing ultrafine Azomite as a foliar spray along with a fertigation of Azomite. And we are seeing some interesting differences here. So water only, no foliar spray, there's our control. So it's much lower than the rest. The only ones that tease out as different from the control are water only with Azomite as a foliar, and Azomite fertigation with Azomite as a foliar. So we think there's something going on with Azomite as a foliar treatment here, that it's teasing itself out as statistically different than the control. Okay, and this is early perfect Italian and stocky red roaster. Sometimes it gets interesting when we overlay a fertilizer study on top of two different cultivars, because we'll see that we have a response in one cultivar and not a response in another cultivar. Really important, but if we start overlaying that too much, then we have too much information about a cultivar. Pretty much where we're going. Okay, so that was our graduate student research. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some stuff that I've been working on the side. Yes, sir.
So Azomite, from the makeup slide early on, looks like it was mostly calcium, a little bit of magnesium. What else?
Okay, I wish Tyler was here to talk to you about this, because I'm pretty sure it's proprietary, but I think Tyler knows it. You know what I mean? Like, I think they let Tyler test it and look at it. Does that sound right to you guys?
Yeah, and just a little bit more about Azomite. I just watched a webinar that had some of these results in it, and it's basically just a volcanic ash product that they mine, and they have a bunch of different formulations. So you mentioned like ultrafine, that's like one of the 6 formulations, but
it's all
everything else is
the
really
texture. Yeah, so they have like pelletized and ultrafine, like a powder. I could see it definitely being useful in potting soil situations. We haven't done that study yet, but it'd be interesting in the greenhouse to give those super micronutrients, trace minerals into the potting soil things. Yeah.
We do use it in our custom potting soil.
Yeah, what do you think?
I like it. But we haven't done control about it. So. And then
you got like 20 things.
Right. We're not a trial farmer. When you fertigate, are you using the ultrafine or using the
definitely the ultrafine. I don't think we could get any of the other ones. They don't have liquid. Azomite doesn't have a liquid. So ultrafine goes into it. And he actually had a pretty easy time of getting that through the drippers without clogging, which was amazing. It is ultrafine.
That's like your standard thin wall of drip lines.
Yeah, we're running. No, it's your standard GP.
Yeah. What I'm
probably. I'm just forgetting. Toro is the brand we're using. We actually use the thickest of the Toros because of hail and mice. But yeah.
That's why I get 8 mil or 10 mil wall.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Ben has heard a lot about Novik lately because we've been giving a lot of presentations about it. I'll talk about it a little bit more. I get really jazzed and excited about this because I used to dream about being a seed farmer. So we're part of Novik, the Northern Organic Vegetable Improvement Collaborative. It's right now got 5 or 6 universities in it across the northern United States. We work with organic plant breeders because of this problem. And we've been talking about it over the last 2 days, right? This problem of seed sourcing. When are we going to force organic growers in the U.S. to have organic seeds? Well, not until the supply is there. And the supply is not going to be there until we have the cultivars we want for organic in the quantities that we want. And so the big goal of this project is to identify cultivars that outperform others within organic systems, which mostly means weed competition, slow release fertilizers, right? A lot of organic fertilizers are slower release and not as quick release. So we're looking for those circumstances, as well as dry, high, intense light and summer heat with a drop in night temperatures specific to our climate. So Colorado, Wyoming, this kind of high, dry area and windy area. So we're looking for those cultivars to outperform. So we can say, for organic farmers in our region, this is the cultivar you should be growing. We're also working with breeders to push them to breed things for us, which is big because, as you might know, we don't have vegetable breeders in our region. So asking a Pacific Northwest breeder who specializes in tomatoes or broccoli to, hey, send us some of your cultivars so we can start selecting from your breeding traits and ask you to do something for us, right? So we're getting something out of this. We work really closely with Cornell University of Cornell, Cornell with pepper plants, and they don't deal with sun scald, and we suffer dearly from Sunscald. So it's been really interesting, little push and shove, like, hey, you really need to test Sunscald. And he's like, hey, I don't have the climate to test Sunscald. So I'm like, hey, send me your plant, so we'll test for Sunscald for you and let you know. So we have done tomatoes. This is 2016 data, and I might have some 2017 in here as well. We have done 2016, 2017, and 2018. 2018 was a non-funded year with Novik, so mostly with the tomatoes, especially because the cultivars are sending us are bred for the Pacific Northwest, so a lot of them are crap. And I keep telling them, send me better cultivars, you know. So last year I didn't take data on them. I was like, I'm not taking data on your cultivars, so you send me better cultivars. But this year we're going to include some Colorado-specific ones. And I want to just point out here, S200 cultivar coming out of Corvallis, Oregon State University, did really well in yield. So we're looking for good yield, but then we're also doing taste testing. So which ones taste well on top of yield, and in particular in our area, we're looking at tomato spotted wilt virus. We've got tomato spotted wilt virus so bad. It's because we grow everything in a shared greenhouse, and we got thrips out the wazoo, and thrips vector tomato spotted wilt virus. So that's something that we can test for really easily, which is great, right? Because we have a lot of it present. But so we were looking at, oh yes, this S200 is a great cultivar, and like the production per plant is huge. Oh my gosh, that thing keeps dying because of tomato spotted wilt virus. So this is feedback that we'll give to the breeders in Oregon to ask them, hey, we need to do some testing for tomato spotted wilt virus resistance. That's a picture of TSW. Yeah.
Or NC12, LV3, those on the market right now?
They are not on the market. So normally these ones that are numbered like this are, they would go on the market if I could get them not here, right?
I forgot to ask you that.
Yeah, I think we could get you, if you wanted to trial some of these university varieties or cultivars, we could probably get you some seed. You might just have to sign a waiver about not saving them or sharing them.
Sure. Yeah, because we need persons for them.
Yeah, and a lot these are open pollinated, but until the breeder's able to release it publicly, he normally doesn't want people sharing it, probably because, oh, we found out it's a terrible cultivar. Do not save that cultivar. We did sweet corn. We've done sweet corn a lot, partially because Tyler is overlapping a lot of suppressed studies on sweet corn, so we have a lot of sweet corn out there. And we're working with Wisconsin-Madison and Bill Tracy, the sweet corn breeder up there. So that is primarily who we've been working with. This is a fun picture of how we taste test all sweet corn, and most analysis of sweet corn is done through taste testing and just looking at the ears and shucking them. A lot of breeding is done the same way. You'll go through a field of tons of different cultivars and you'll just walk through, take a bite, good, put it in the good pile. Bad, put it in the bad pile. And that's how sweet corn breeding is done on the organic. It really is. And actually, most of these cultivars come out of a conventional sweet corn company that would give us untreated seeds so that we could trial in comparison to some of these new breeding lines to see how they perform. In general, pretty good sweet corn, pretty good, you know, earworm resistance, lots of different shapes and colors. And you get really, really sick of sweet corn. Nirvana came to the top in the first year, trialed again the second year, and it was in the top 2. So Nirvana is a really good sweet corn cultivar for our area, especially as far as taste goes. It stands above the rest. Roasting and bell peppers are what we do the most of. We have a huge roasting and bell pepper trial every year. Some pictures of, this is probably Stocky Red Roaster, but it could be Early Perfect Italian because they look a lot alike. This probably right here is a cultivar out of, these are Tyler's pictures, but pretty sure I know which each one is. This one is probably out of Arkansas Valley. We have a plant breeder selector down there who's been working, Mike Bartolo, who's been working on like chili roasting peppers, so some heat in there. And they do so great in our region because they were selected in this, you know, dry climate with lots of sun. This is Aristotle, one of those beautiful, huge, blocky bell peppers that I cannot get to turn color in Colorado, but if you're cool with a green pepper, that thing kills it. The thing absolutely kills it. And Tyler has taken all of these guys to the farmer's market and just wrangled in all the people walking by to do official taste tests. So he has a lot of great taste testing data with a lot of different palettes involved. So of these pepper evaluations, here's what kind of floated to the top. So I said we chose Early Perfect Italian and Stocky Red Roaster. So Early Perfect Italian, best tasting in the taste evaluations at the farmer's market. And then we have Stocky Red Roaster being one of the best marketable fruit counts. So these two really did float high. We also like Classic Italian and Carmen F1, trying to really focus on open pollinated, so that Carmen kind of drops off. And that Classic Italian fell pretty low on the yield side. So that's how we kind of pick our best performers for the year. I can give you a sense of that. Any questions about, yeah?
I just had a quick question about the sweet corn. What are you, because you mentioned that your worms, are you doing any pest management?
Nothing for any of
You're
them.
looking at like how they do with
One
nothing?
time I sprayed BT on cabbage, one time, in 3 years. So for the most part, we're not doing anything because we want to see what is pest resistant, right? So you want to actually stress these guys out a lot, which makes it really easier as a grower when you forget to water and you're like, well, it doesn't really matter because you want them to be stressed out anyway, right? And like, you know, sometimes people will say, hey, don't you think you should be spraying for this? And it's like, no, actually we shouldn't be spraying for that. So we want to see what there is. So we've treated the sweet corn with nothing. Yeah.
How are you keeping cross-pollination down? Because you've got a lot of,
Cross-pollination affects the next generation, not the current generation.
but you've got a lot of GM corn all around.
Oh, well, so according to our organic certifier, our buffers are significant, or are sufficient, right? So we have a 50-foot kind of buffer on the side where the corn is usually grown. Flowering also is a very different time, and we're not saving seed from it. So because of that, if I were to sell seed, I would be way more particular about that. Yeah, luckily we know the growers around us. They are other researchers at CSU, even if they're doing GM corn, where there's some communication there. Winter squash, another one of our big crops, and we are switching gears. We've done delicata in the past. Delicata JS, which is a Johnny seed selection, came out as one of the most flavorful and also decent yielding. Honey Bear, I believe, is a Cornell produced cultivar. Really delicious, cute little delicata. Really poor yielding, but that's because it's tiny, right? So depending on what your market's looking for, it might be something that you would be willing to tolerate the lower amount of yield in. One thing that's really interesting, we do these, I set up squash tastings often in our horticulture building at CSU and try to get everyone in the department to come taste the squash. And you realize that you might actually be turning people off from squash because after you eat that much squash, you may never want to eat squash again. And that tends to be very true. And then the other thing that tends to be true is people who thought they liked squash turn out they actually realize that they don't like squash based on some of these taste tests as well. So like statistically leveling out some of those tasters are really hard. Right, so if we get a taster that gives everything poor because they didn't like squash, statistically look to see if they're an outlier and remove them from that situation and not let them contaminate the numbers of all the rest of them. Because we want to know if it's good squash for those who like squash. Okay, so here's our information and our contact information. This is the breakdown of Mark's position, which because I am Mark is also kind of the breakdown of my position. I do about 10% outreach right now, and then support a lot of graduate students. I'm turning the lights on. We can have a conversation. If you have any questions, there's a lot of stuff I didn't show in here. Where's that at? Yeah.
On winter squash, are you using brulee butternut for instance?
We are trying brulee butternut because it's new.
It's out of Cornell.
Yeah. Anything that Michael Mazurek at Cornell produces, I'd like to try.
Yeah.
So we tried. They had honey nut butter squash. And some regional farmers tried that and had very poor performance with it, which is too bad because it's a tasty little thing. Have you done
Growing Seeds is all about this brulee, saying that it is earlier and better storing than popular honey nut.
But not selected in Colorado.
Right, very high yields on basic plants. So
Right.
I'd like to see that.
Yep. Brulee will be in our study this year. This year we're going to do, we're going to return to we're going to do a mix, a few delicata, a few butternut, a few Any other questions? That's Tyler. He's the one that did all the Azomite and suppressed studies. So if you have specific questions, we're going to ask him. You got a question for him?
I guess I'm just curious about this suppress. Is it being widely used by people? I mean,
The guy we're buying it from says he's got quite a few growers using it. A lot of the bigger guys are using it for just like special areas. So tracks in like areas where you cannot weed eat or like tracks in your rolling thunders or something, right? Like areas that are harder to manage. But Tyler is trying to produce this mechanism of putting down suppressant shielded sprayers. So maybe you can talk about.
It's so new.
Yeah.
There's not even a lot of research on it. There's only been two other institutions that have put out anything. So the project that we worked on was the first time it was applied in a crop setting and taken to yield. And I'm sure Natalie went through all of those details. But we're going to publish that article probably in the next 6 months. And from there, it'll be interesting to see how it's picked up. So I think there's just a bit of hesitation. I've heard about it from this chemical salesperson, and I've heard about a lot of other chemical sales. So I don't know if it's going to work.
Is it just as crappy as vinegar? Because vinegar doesn't work for me.
Right, exactly. So I think once we publish this 2-year study, I think that will get into the hands of extension agents as well as institutions, and I expect other people to start doing more research on it. But I mean, you saw the picture. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yes.
Are there any applicator risks associated with the acrylic?
Definitely. So, you get it on your skin in a high concentration, it will burn. You're not talking about a severe chemical burn, but you're talking about burn. So you need to be wearing appropriate gear when applying it. So Tyler dresses himself up in protective gear.
Just standard PPE.
Yeah.
But because it's an acid, you want to protect your eyes when you're mixing it in your hands.
I also,
I'm sorry.
I
I should
received-
say clean your tanks when you're done as well, because it's corrosive.
I've received some solicitations for 30% acetic acid. If somebody uses that, see if they
20%, I think is standard that I've seen, yeah. It's going to be interesting because I think in the organic world, there's a hesitancy to spray anything, in all honesty. And if you don't have your license to apply things, it might be hard also. You would want to go through the process probably of getting an applicator license or at least a handler license if there's an applicator at your facility. Yeah.